Kakadosh Boker Or Masechet Batra Shavua Tov Masechet Batra Daf Kavav Mudalev 26a1. Yeah, so we're starting on the top of the page, where the top of the page says Deve Bar Mirion Bered Ravin Ki Hava Nafte Kitna. When the household of Bar Mirion, the son of Ravin, would come and they would start, I don't know how you say it, you're doing to the flax, but I mean, I've seen the pets is like combing the flax, but in a way that they're hitting it, right, in order to take away, to beat it, to take out all the bad things, right? So therefore, these broken pieces of the flax would come and it would damage people. So Ravina, they came in front of Ravina, right? So they come in front of Ravina, and what happens is Amar Lehu, so he comes and he says, he comes and he says like this, when does Rabbi Yosef admit when it's his arrows that are coming and damaging? Only if it's coming from his koach. But here it's not his koach. It's the wind. The wind's taking it. It's not him. So therefore, it's not the same thing. So Matkifla Mor Baravashi, so Mor Baravashi comes and he asks, Maishna mizoreh v'ruach masayeto. What's the difference from zoreh on Shabbat? Zoreh is winnowing. When you winnow on Shabbat, you're going to be chayav. Remember, winnowing is you throw it up in the air and then it divides the chaff and the how do you call these things? The staff, right? So therefore, it's also and it's still yours. You're the one that's doing it. So that is gira delay. So Amrua Kamed Meneimar Amarlo, he says, Hainu Zorev Ruach Masayato. You're right, that is Zorev Ruach Masayato. And Ravina comes and he says, Maishna from Ayotze Mitachat Patish the Chayav, right? What does that mean? Imagine right now I take a hammer and I bang and something shoots out, it chips out, right? And it hits, I'm going to be chayav. So what's the difference then? Here, what's the difference? I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm taking like a hammer, I'm beating the flax, and something comes out. It's not just a wind and that's it. It's coming from me, just like the hammer. So answers the Gemara, he says, no. There, when you want that it should go somewhere else. Because if it's going to go here, it's going to damage. Here, you don't want that. Meaning when you're coming, you're beating on the flax, right? You don't want it to go somewhere else. You want it to be right here. So the fact that you don't want it to go somewhere else, you're going to be patur. And that's going to be the difference, right, between the two. Mishnah, Kavam Mudalev 26a, the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Lo ita adam ilan samuk l'stei chavro lemken echik mimenu arba'a amot. Right? You're not allowed to plant a tree beside the field of your friend unless you're going to come and you're going to distance yourself 4 amot. Doesn't matter whether you're planting a vineyard or you're planting any other type of a tree. If there's going to be a fence in between, each one, right, can put it beside the gader. What does it mean beside the gader? You could come and you could put it beside the fence. Okay? That means there's no problem without even distancing at all. It means you don't even need the daled amot. Okay. What about if I've got the roots of the tree coming into my field? That's what happens many times, right? You have a tree right beside my field, and all of a sudden in my property, I've got your roots. So he says, what are you allowed to do? Right? You're allowed to come and cut the depth of 3 tfachim in order that it doesn't stop my plow. So when I'm plowing my field, right, even though I've got your roots, listen, if it's much further down, no. I can't dig all the way down to get rid of your roots. 1 second, Richard. Try. Yeah, but what I'm allowed to do is I'm allowed to take 3 tfachim in order that when I'm plowing, I don't have any problems. Okay, yeah, what happens if I'm digging a bor siach me'ara, which is basically a pit, different types of pits, obviously. But if I'm digging types of pits, right? So he says, you could continue cutting downwards, and the wood belongs to you. It doesn't even belong to the other guy, to the owner of the tree. It belongs to you. Okay, says the Gemara. Tana, we learned to the Braita. Arba amot shamru. Why did they say that you have 4 amot? He says, Arba amot is kedei avodat hakerem. In order for you to come and to work on the vineyard, which means that you need, for the plowing of the vineyard and everything, you need 4 amot. And therefore, that's why we want to make sure that you're going to have a 4 amot distance in order that you're able to go around and you're able to do your plow and everything in order exactly to do it. Yes. So Amar Shmuel says, Loshanu ela Eretz Yisrael. That's only in Eretz Yisrael. But in Bavel, shte amot. Why? Because basically in Babylonia, the machinery that they used for the plowing was only 2 amot, which means it was thinner. So therefore, basically, it all depends on the machinery. If I'm using a bigger machinery, so I need more space. If I'm using a skinnier machinery, so I need less space. So he comes and he says, in Bavel, all you need is 2 amot. Tanya Miyachi also learned this in a Braita, lo ita adam milan samuch ustei chavro mimken yechel mimenu shte amot. All you need to distance is 2 amot. V'anan tran, says the Gemara, but we learned 4 amot. Elalav kedei Shmuel, but it's like what Shmuel said, Shma mina, that there's a difference between Bavel and Eretz Yisrael. There's a difference in what type of machinery that you're using. In Eretz Yisrael, you need 4 because the machinery was bigger, and in Bavel, you need 2 because the machinery was smaller. However, though, even though here we brought it as a proof, meaning this Braita was brought like a proof to that which Shmuel said. Some people, they learned it like a question and answer, meaning, some people, they asked it as a question. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, that you're not allowed to plant a tree unless it's going to be 4 amot. We learned it right at 2 amot. Shmuel says, it's not a question. Here's a Bavel. Meaning, it wasn't a form of, this is a statement from Shmuel, and then we bring a proof, but rather it was a question and answer, and that's exactly what's going on. Okay? Nekuda. Dot. Let's continue. Story. Okay, to do with our Mishnah. Rabba bar Hanan, havu lehu anau dikle, a mitzra de pardesid Rav Yosef. Rabba bar Hanan, he had palm trees, which were on the mitzar of the pardes of Rav Yosef. Yeah? So he had on the border of Rav Yosef. So they were coming, the tzipurim, and they were right there, and so the birds were coming on the palm trees. So they were going on the pardes, the orchard, and they were damaging it. So says Rav Yosef to Rabba bar Hanan, Zilkotz, go cut your palm trees. Why? Because your palm trees are causing damage to my vineyard. Amarle, he said, says what? I distanced them 4 amot. So I could do whatever I want. Meaning, you can't start telling me now to cut down my palm trees. I distanced them 4 amot. I did my job. Amar no. So he says, Amaleh, he says, Hanemile, one of these words, right? Lilanot, only to do with trees. Avale gefanim, but to do with a vineyard, bain and tfei, you need more than 4 amot because of the birds that they shouldn't damage. So he comes and he says, what? But we learned in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah it said, Echad gefanim ve'echad kolilan. 4 amot was universal, meaning it was that's for everything. Not this is for this. No. 4 amot is 4 amot. Doesn't matter whether it's a vineyard or anything else. Yeah. So he comes and he says, right, like this. He says kol ilan. He says echad gefanim ve'echad kol ilan. Amalei, he told him hanemile between ilan ve'ilan ve'gefanim ve'gefanim. Aval ilan legefanim, and he says no. You didn't understand the Mishnah. When the Mishnah said that you're not allowed to plant a tree, unless you distance 4 amot, that doesn't matter whether it's talking about a vineyard or a tree. It didn't mean, right, that your tree, you distance from a vineyard or from a tree 4 amot. It meant when you have 1 tree and I have 1 tree, 4 amot. When you have 1 vineyard and I have 1 vineyard, it's 4 amot. But when you have a tree and I have a vineyard, that's not written in the Mishnah. Our Mishnah was only talking about a tree to a tree or a vineyard to a vineyard. This is, again, the way that Rabbi Yosef is learning our Mishnah. And therefore, he's coming and telling him, listen, you had to distance yourself more than 4 amot. 4 amot was only when you had a tree and I have a tree. I have a vineyard, you have a tree. You have to distance yourself more. So Amarle, so he comes and he says, Ana lo kaitzana. He says, I'm not going to come and cut them down. The Amar Rav, because Rav said, Hai dikred tain kaba. When you have a date tree that has dates, asul mixir, you're not allowed to come and you're allowed to cut it down. It's got fruit. It's got fruits. So he comes and he says like this. So he says, right? He says why? Because it says you're not allowed to cut it down. The Amar Ochadin it says lo shachiv shichvat beri, right? He didn't die shichat his son. Ela de kat stianata bozine, because he went and he cut down a tree, right, when it still had fruits. So he comes and he tells him, he says, you know what? If you don't like the tree, you cut it down. That's what he told him. Yeah? Now, it doesn't actually say what happened. Still, it's a Hyman Gregan. So that's what he says like this. He says, even though you're not, he says, the isur to cut down a fruit tree does not apply to a tree which is damaging others. Right? That's what the footnote says. However, though, for Rava, he's saying like what Richard said. He's saying for Rava, it wasn't a certain that the birds are considered behemet his arrows. And because of that, he wasn't sure that he was obligated to cut down the tree. So since he wasn't sure that he's obligated, meaning if for sure his tree is causing damage, he has to cut down the tree. It's a fruit tree. It doesn't apply the isur of cutting down a fruit tree, right? So therefore, he comes and he tells Rava, so you do. He tells Rav Yosef, so you do it then. Yeah, exactly. So therefore, you have to do it, but you do it yourself. But I'm not going to do it. But it doesn't actually say if he did it or not. But okay, that's just happened. Another case, okay. Rav Papa avu le'ana udikle. You were probably cheating, yeah.
I haven't looked. See me look down. I did it this morning.
Exactly. That means you already learned this. Yeah. So he comes and he says like this. He says, Rav Papa have a lehu right. Have a le'ana udikle amitza dravuna b'Yeshua. So Rav Papa he had palm trees on the meitzar. Remember, a meitzar is like mina meitzar is like a boundary, right? So the boundary of Ravuna Yeshua, Ravuna the son of Yeshua. Azal ashkachet davachafar, right? So what happened was he found him that he was digging the kakait shorashim. He was cutting the shorashim. See, when he told him, Elmaleh, Maya, what are you doing? Elmaleh, he says, now we learned. Ayu shorashim yitzim to chavero, mamik shosha kedosh lekom echsha. Elmaleh, he says, hanimile shlosha, more kachafar tvei. Just 1 second, 1 second. That's only 3, but not more. You're coming and you're digging and digging. What are you doing? It's only 3 tvachim that you could come and take, 24 centimeters. So he says, Elmaleh, he says, I'm digging a bore, I'm digging a pit. Right? He's yored vatzim shelo. Rav Papa comes and he says, Amri le kulhi. Right? I brought a whole bunch of different proofs, velo yachilele, but I wasn't able to convince him not to do it. Kavava mubet 26b. Ad de Amri le hadam Rav Yehuda, until I went and I told him that which Rav Yehuda said. That what? Meitzar shechzik bo rabim asul lekalkelo. When you have a gvul, right, which is basically a border in between 2 different fields, and a lot of people are they already use it, meaning it became a common passage, the right of way. So therefore, it's a sur lekalkelo. He's not allowed to come and do it. So he says the same thing, meaning since I have a chazakah that my shorashim, my roots are going into your property, so therefore you're not allowed to cut it down, even though you're digging a pit. That's what he's telling you, and he accepted it, right? So he comes and he says, after he came out, Amar, he said, why didn't you say, why didn't you tell him that which is at sur to come and to cut the shorashim is only within the 16 amot of the tree, because that's where it gets the strength from the ground. But outside the 16 amot from the tree, right, he says there's no chazakah then, and therefore you're allowed to cut it down. Meaning, even according to this, even according to what you want to say, that kilu, that you have a chazakah, whatever it is, a tree, even if the roots are going more than 16 amot, it only gets nourishment from 16 amot. So it's around 8 meters. That's the nourishment. That means even though it's going further, doesn't matter. You could cut them there because nothing's going to happen. Meaning it only gets it until the 16 amot. Okay? 2 dots. So he said if you're digging a pit, you could dig all the way down, and after digging all the way down, so therefore the wood and everything belongs to you. Right? He comes and he says like this. He says, Yaakov Hadiyav from Masechta. It seems Shelmi. Who does the wood belong to? Does the wood belong to the Bala Ilan or to the one that's cutting down the tree? Yeah? 1 second. Elmaleh, he says, we learned it. When you have shorashim of a tree, right, roots of a tree of idiot, of a normal person that's coming into a property of Ekdesh, right, which means midrabanan, you're not allowed to benefit from them. But really, be'emet, it's only isur milah that you're not going to be isur milah, meaning you didn't benefit from kodshim, and therefore you're not obligated to pay back the 5th and bring the korban hasham. So you see from here that the shorshei ilan of idiot which are coming in, they're not kodshim. So now he says, if you're going to tell me that we go after the tree, mishumachi, so that's why it's not milah. But if you're going to tell me that we go after the karka, so therefore why is it not milah? So therefore he wants to bring a proof from a Gemara over there right? Which is actually a Mishnah and Milah, that he wants to bring a proof. Who does it belong to? Elamai, but rather, Batari Lazlin, we always go after the tree. So let's see the Seifa. The Seifa says, what happens if you have the opposite case? It's a tree of Ekdesh, which is going into a property of Edyot. Lo ne'enim v'lo mo'alin. You don't benefit from it, and there's no milah. Now he says, 1 second, but here also doesn't make sense. Because if you're going after the tree, so why is there no milah? One more time, the tree belonged to Hekdesh. It's going into your property. We said the roots, you're allowed to come and do it. It says you're not allowed to benefit from it, but there's no milah. 1 second, over here, there should be milah. Because if you're going after the tree, there should be milah. So it's like a contradiction. Like, what's going on? There's something wrong here, right? What's going on? So he says, 1 second. So he says, Mindi idia gidulina ba'in, right? He says, la'achar mikan askinan. He says, is that a proof? There we're talking about something that grows afterwards, right? What does that mean? We're talking about shorashim that they grew after the tree or the land was consecrated, meaning it was something that came afterwards, not now, not from the beginning, and you consecrated it. It came afterwards. So he says, en milah begidulin. There's no milah in gidulin, meaning something that grows after you made a ekdesh, there's no milah in it. And therefore, since there's no milah in it, you cannot bring a proof from our Mishnah, meaning from the Mishnah over there in milah, which means one more time. We wanted to ask, who does it belong to? You're right. Our Mishnah already told you who does it belong to, but forget about that, right? Right? Because we said that it says in the Mishnah that kotzetz v'aitzim shelo. It says it. But 1 second, but he comes and he says, but we already learned in the Mishnah milah. He came and he brought a proof from the Reisha, the former part of the Mishnah. Former part of the Mishnah says, if it belongs to the regular Jew and it went to the Ekdesh field, it's assumed that a banan to benefit from it, but technically speaking, there's no milah. Then why? We go after the tree. So the Gemara says, yeah, but let's say the latter part of the Mishnah. The latter part of the Mishnah said the opposite case, where it would belong to the Ekdesh, and it was going to regular Jews' field, and we said also the same thing, you're not allowed to benefit, and there's no milah. Now, why not? If the tree was Ekdesh, so why not? And so the Gemara, no. What we're talking about is the what? New shoots, exactly. Meaning something that grew afterwards, there's no Ekdesh in it. There's no, you can't bring a proof to what we just mentioned until now. So what happens now? So Ravina comes and he says, Lakashi, it's not a question. Comes Ravina and he says, I don't understand what's the to answer up between the Reisha and the Seifa. It's very, very simple. Is it within the 16 amot or after the 16 amot? Within the 16 amot, since they're coming and getting the nourishment, so it's part of the tree, and therefore they belong to the Bala Ilan, to the owner of the tree. But the Seifa is talking about outside of the 16 amot, and therefore, since it's not part of the tree anymore, so they belong to the owner of the field. Meaning that's exactly how Ravina answers up the different Mishnah. He's basically just saying it depends where it is in the tree. Meaning, if it's within the 16 amot, it's essential to the tree, so it belongs to the tree, even though it's in your property. And if it's outside of the 16 amot, so if it's not, so therefore it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the owner of the field. Okay? Fine. Yeah, 2-3 minutes. Okay. As usual. Okay, so perfect. That's even better then. Okay. Fine. Amarula. Ula says, Ilana samuch lebetzah betoch, right, betoch sheshe ma gazlan hu. Ve'em meviim mimenu bikurim. Do you know that if you have an ilan, which is right beside, within the 16 amot, right, of a field, he doesn't bring bikurim. Remember, bikurim are the first fruits. Why? He's considered a gazlan. He's a thief. So says the Gemara, how does Ula know that? It's going to be because we learned in Shavit, when you have 10 different saplings are the young trees, which are going to be spread upon a field, which is a betzeah, you're allowed to come and you're allowed, meaning like this. Usually, the halachot of Shemitah start from a month, from Rosh Chodesh Elul. A month, you remember? We learned this already many times, right? In Kinyan Masechta also, right? There was a halachot of Shemitah Sinai. So he says, so therefore, yeah, Nisuch HaMayim. It was Nisuch HaMayim. Yeah. So he comes and he says, 1 second, you had here, right, this field that usually Rosh Chodesh Elul, you stop right before Shemitah. Rosh Chodesh Elul before Shemitah, and even though Shemitah only starts with Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh Elul, you're not allowed to work the field. Here, when you have 10 saplings, that in order for them to survive, you have to continue going, so therefore you're allowed to go until Rosh Hashanah. You have an extra month to continue plowing and doing all these works. So says the Gemara, Kama Havalu. So how many amot are in a betzeah? So he says, yes, the map is on the bottom. Yes, right, the diagram. So he says it's 2,500 amot, right? Squared. So he says, lechol chav echad kam. So how much is each one? Matan v'chamshin. So you need 250 square amot, right? So it comes out then, because since the bet seah is 50 rows of 50 amot, so it comes out that it's 2,500 square, and therefore this is how it's coming out. So he says, 1 second. So halo havi de ula. This is not the shiur of ula, because according to ula, it's only 16 amot. So it means each ilan would have, right? Ish 1,024 amot merubot is 1,024 amot merubaot, right? Which means what's going on then? So he says, you're right. So it can't be from there then. Meaning it cannot be from such a place, right? The Gemara is explaining that the nourishment of an ilan is always going to be squared. So therefore, if according to Ula, then it's 16 amot to every single direction, right? It comes out that it's if you have a ribua, if you have like a square, right, of 32 by 32, right, which is actually going to be 32 times 32 is 1,024. So he comes and he says, it comes out, that means you're going to need 1,024 amot. What's going on? It's not like that for one tree. So obviously they can't be like that. So he says, okay, fine. So Ve'elamid is done. It has to be somewhere else. It says there are 3 trees, al shlosha bnei adam, which means what happens if you have 3 trees, right, that belong to 3 different people, right? And they are in a bet seah, l'orkol rochbo. Harelu mitztarfim, so they combine. V'chorshim kol bet seah bishvilo. And you're going to come and you're going to plow the entire field for it, right? Until Erev Shvi'it, just like that. So kama havalu, so how much is it? Tre alfei v'chamesh me'agamide. Again, it's going to be 2,500 square mot. So how much is it? It's still going to be 833, right? And a third. So therefore, again, so it's still more than Ula, right? Ula is still bigger than this, right? Because he went and he said it's still 1,024. So so answers the Gemara.
Close enough.
Right. So he says lo dak. He wasn't precise.